All right, so the first thing that I want to do is provide a little bit of context and clarity around a lot of the terminology that is being thrown around. So, as many of you all know, I'm a coach, right? So, I do coaching work. And specifically, a lot of my coaching work focuses on communication. And what you will find happening is people use language assuming that your definition of the word that I'm using is the same definition of the word that you're using. And many, many times it is not, even in the most simplest of terms. So I'm going to give you a quick example and then I'm going to provide some clarity for you, okay? So, in working with this couple, husband and wife, right? They're sitting there in this session, and they're talking about what their plans are and what they want to do. And the husband says, "Well, I want us to buy a bigger house soon." And the wife loses it. "What the hell do you mean you want to buy another house soon? We've got this coming. We just had a baby and we've got da 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 da. And what do you mean you want to buy a bigger house soon?" And like this big fight explodes. She is completely like limbic, which we'll talk about that in just a second. And she's not listening. And he's just like, "What the heck?" And so bringing them back to center, this was the question. The very first question was, I turned to the husband and said, "What did you mean by the word soon?" And he said, "I don't know, in like 2 years." And the wife's whole face changed. And the question to her was, "What did you mean by the word soon?" And she said, "In 6 months or less." We oftentimes use language with an understanding of what we mean, and other people do not understand it. Okay? Now, I'm using that as a very normal, average, ordinary example of how communication or the way that we speak to each other is not heard and misunderstood because the definition, the meaning of that word to one person is not the same to others. Now, some of you might not like that I'm about to say this, and that's okay. It is not productive for white Americans to tell blacks or minorities, Native Americans, Hispanics, to tell them what is or is not racism, especially if you have not ever researched it, if you've never been immersed in the field, if you've done no cultural immersion in your life. It is not a productive thing to do, especially now. So if you guys are familiar at all with the triune brain theory, right? The 3 different parts of the brain, okay? So there are 3 different parts of the brain and how we hear information, all right? And when you hear information, the very first thing that your brain does, you can look this up. It's called the triune brain theory, and I can't think of the guy's name right now. But so listen, when you hear information, the very first thing your brain does is assess if there's a threat, right? It's your very primal instinct, fight or flight, or is there a threat, right? And then the very next thing that happens is this emotional response to this thing. Okay. So when you have this emotional response, you can be what's called limbic. The limbic part when you go limbic, it is a very intense, very non-thought out, very emotional response. There is no rhyme or reason. Nothing makes sense. When someone is in limbic, they hear nothing you have to say. There is no rational conversation. You might as well wait until they come down in order to move forward. This is in regular life, folks. Have you ever seen or been so listen, you ever heard someone said, "I saw red"? When someone says, "I was so angry, I saw red, I couldn't think, I don't remember what happened," that is going limbic. When someone is in that state, there is no rational communication. It does not happen. So you have to understand a couple of things that we have transpiring right now. We have a lot of people that are straight in limbic mode, some of them in fight or flight mode, right? Because they perceive a threat. And then you have people throwing around words like racism and not having a clear understanding of what the word means. So I want to break this down for you and give you a little bit of information. And I looked around till I could find like one of the most simplistic ways to explain this. Not because I think anyone on here is an idiot. Not that I don't think that you're intelligent, but that it's important that this information be as easy to digest as possible for anyone who may be watching. Okay, so check this out. So when we talk about the word prejudice, and I'm looking at a site, this is from an individual, she's a racial justice educator and writer by the name of Debbie Irving. So I want to give her credit. This is not Danny Cook's words. And so she says prejudice, and I'm quoting, is when a person negatively prejudges, right? So take the word prejudice. It's a prejudgment of another person or group without getting to know their beliefs, their thoughts, and their feelings behind their words and their actions. A person of any racial group can be prejudiced towards a person of any other racial group. There is no power dynamic involved. Listen, that last sentence is incredibly important. That is incredibly important. There is no power dynamic involved in prejudice. Okay? Listen, folks, please don't tell me what racism is. Listen to what I'm sharing with you. If you are on here and before I can even give you the information that I have, you are telling me what it is, you are part of the problem. You're not listening. And I don't know how many times that Martin Luther King Jr. quote has to be put up. Riot is the language of the unheard. Shut up and listen. And that's as nicely as I can say that. Listen. Not to what you think you know. Listen. So again, prejudice is when someone negatively prejudges another person or group without getting to know their beliefs, their thoughts, their feelings behind their words and their actions. Anyone with any level of pigmentation in your skin can be prejudiced towards a person of another group. But this is the important piece. There is no power dynamic involved. All right? Now let's graduate. Let's graduate from prejudice to bigotry. Okay? Let's do that. We're going to graduate to bigotry. Bigotry is stronger than prejudice. It's a more severe mindset, and it's often accompanied by discriminatory behavior. It's arrogant, it's mean-spirited, but it requires neither systems nor power to engage in. So like I personally have encountered bigots a lot of times in my life, but they did not need a system of power to be bigots. They didn't need a system to be bigots. They could just be bigots because that's what they chose. Again, they did not need a system. Even though it's mean-spirited, even though it's hateful, they did not need a system to be that way. So let me see if I can give you a recent example, okay? If you take Amy Cooper in the Ramble in Central Park, and she had her dog not on the leash, right? If she had simply said, you know, you're an arrogant nigger, whatever, or if she had gone back home and said, you know, I think I felt threatened by that African-American man, then she would be a bigot, right? When she said to him, I'm going to call 911, engaging the system. Y'all got that? when she said to him, I'm going to call 911 and tell them that an African American man is threatening my life, that's because she's aware of a system that is in place that provides her the power to do that. Y'all got it? Prejudice does not require power or a system. Bigotry takes it up a notch, and it's hateful and it's mean-spirited. But again, it does not require the assistance of a system and of a system of power and oppression. Racism, my friends, racism is the system that allows the racial group already in power to retain power. I'm going to say it again. Racism is the system that allows the racial group that's already in power to retain power. The article goes on to say, since arriving on U.S. soil, white people have used their power to create preferential access to survival rights and resources like housing, education, jobs, voting, citizenship, food, health, legal protection, etc. For white people, while simultaneously impeding people of color's access to these same rights and resources, right? So they're using a system to give themselves access while restricting and oppressing the access of another group of people. That is a system of racism. So when you say, well, this black man wouldn't told my white son to leave because his black daughter couldn't date him, that's racist. No, that's prejudice. That's bigotry. But it is not racism because he doesn't need a system. Because I promise you, had your white son said that he felt threatened by that black father, your white son could have picked up the phone and called the system to stand up for him. It is important that we all begin to use the same language if we are going to communicate and if we are going to understand each other.